It never gives us a little counter. It says, oh, and there we go, and the recording. All right, well, thanks for being here on Wednesday, May 5th, for PPS Learning Cafe. We're doing building screencasts for asynchronous learning, and it's something that we've been doing most likely since last year about this time. But as we move forward, especially with our one-to-one rollouts that are coming, and then just the different perspectives we may be taking on teaching and learning, this can actually be something that we start thinking about doing with our students, whether we're in person or not. Real quick, my name is Ryan Hoxie, and I am a Learning Technologies TOSA in the Otis team with the Learning Tech team there. You can always get a hold of me on email or on Twitter, but I always like to make these presentations as interactive as possible. So I need to actually go back a slide and grab, whoops. There we go. The bit.ly, which you're welcome to join us in the slide or grab it for later. I'll go ahead and drop in the chat there. And you can just copy and paste that, and you're welcome to use this slide deck for anything, as a resource, as a thing to come back to. Totally up to you. All right. And I am trying a new extension, so if I'm bumbling around, sorry about that. Okay, the focus on what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm looking at a lot of the things that we do in terms of like the blended learning environment that we're currently engaged in with our asynchronous or with our at-home learners, knowing that we can take some of these lessons we're teaching ourselves or discovering along the way to help enhance our instruction at next year, and whether we start to think about how we can create videos or even like flipped classroom experiences for our students. This is kind of the foundation that today's presentation is wrapped around, specifically the flipped classroom component, where we can start to deliver instruction without even being with our kids. It can be something that can be considered homework, or it can be considered something to do in class as a part of a station. But I think the idea is, as we kind of take a look at what we'll be doing, the big question will be, how can we apply this with the teachers we support and the students we work with? All right. And just a real quick recap as far as a screencast, just definition of what a screencast is and why this can be a really exceptional tool to start using, or strategy to start using. Quite simply, a screencast is a digital video recording of your computer screen, usually with slides, but it could be really anything recorded. You could even be recording yourself. I think that having, especially in Screencastify, and Liliana, I'm sorry, am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, Liliana, do you use Screencastify with the camera sometimes of yourself, or well, maybe not. It depends on what you're making.
Actually, I didn't use the camera. I just projected the slides, and I taught where I presented some information for parents, and I just walked through.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So that's you've got screencasting down. It's taking that information, getting it out digitally, and then pushing it to our digital resources, whether that's Seesaw for our elementary or for secondary. It could be Canvas. I think what's super powerful is the data shows that we retain information that we view in a screencast, no matter really what the content is. 80% of the viewers in a study have come back to say that they can recall some information that they have viewed in a video. Now, usually these are high interest videos, high interest being I want to learn something, and it's like not really passive learning. It's like that active engagement where you're going out to seek that information. But regardless, that's a huge number to say that we can recall something from 30 days ago that we watched. Personally, when I want to learn how to fix something around the house, I consult YouTube first. And I never considered myself a handy person until I was able to watch and see if something could be done. And I have been able to decide, yes, that's a project I can do, or, oh goodness, I'm going to need an expert for that. But I can definitely say that I've learned a lot more about home maintenance based off of YouTube there. So I guess really the big question is, what are the purposes of our screencast? Like what's the foundation here? And I think that as we're starting to consider screencasts for students that we're not necessarily going to be engaged within at that particular moment, a screencast can be founded in previewing content. And that's kind of why we've got the little bookends there. We can think of screencasts in the flipped model as a way for us to give kids information about a subject, about an activity, about anything that they don't really have any background information from, or you have not addressed it as a class at this point yet. So it's a way for you to start to deliver that content outside of regular, the brick and mortar classroom. Just some examples of what that could look like. Building your content knowledge, and whether that is a series of videos starting at the beginning of a unit or at the beginning of a topic or a beginning of whatever you're going to be addressing, and just sort of going in a sequence of first, second, third, and then last. It's a great way to lay that foundation. So as you come back with your class, either face-to-face or at home learning, they've already gotten some of that information. They've already started to think about whatever that concept is. And you're not starting from scratch. You're actually going to be at, hopefully, the next level up where you can go forward. Another way that we can look at the purpose of a screencast would be for demonstrating thinking. And really that could be demonstrating your thinking as you're perhaps going through an activity, or guiding students, modeling something that you would like them to accomplish. So much like my example of going to YouTube to see if I can do something, same idea. My favorite YouTubers who are, it's funny, now I'm just kind of going off on my little bird walks, but it's funny how animated and how concise some of these electricians and plumbers and people are, helping us understand what it is that we're trying to do. And they just do a great job of demonstrating their thinking as they're going from step 1 to step 2, step 3. I have a guy that I watched all the steps on how to fix a dishwasher, and he just did a great job of, well, the first thing that I'm going to do, what you would think about it. It was almost like an interaction, although I was certainly just consuming, but I was listening to his thinking and it was making sense to me. So as we progressed from identification of the problem to the solution, I kind of felt like I was a part of the experience, and being successful in that was the ultimate, I hope, compliment to him, but then satisfaction for me there. The next approach that we can be taking as we're thinking about the purpose of our screencast is really direct instruction, and that could be an opportunity for you to literally begin that first task, or to begin that first example. Depends on what the content is, obviously, but the direct instruction focus could be just reviewing where you were last, making sure that you state your learning target or your learning intention for hopefully where we're going to be, and then start to present that new material. And I think that of all the different focuses we may have while creating a screencast, the direct instruction might connect most directly to the flipped learning approach, where the direct instruction would be provided to students, and then when students come back, whether they're in class or not in class, where you can then actually be actively involved with their understanding, getting some checks on their understanding, whether that's a quick formative assessment or simply finding out where we are, but then to engage in the content there. That way, it's kind of like the reverse, like the idea of flipped learning is the acquisition of knowledge, and the sit and get lecture learning is at home with video, and then the hands-on work, the actual application of that work, is done within class there. So that could definitely be a way that we approach our videos as we're moving forward, even as we're getting further away from remote learning and from hopefully hybrid learning too. And then, as always, it's just really nice to make sure that there's some sort of a learning target put up there. That's just kind of standard practice. But I had to find a reason to put my little dancing target in there. So just a quick reminder there. On the flip end, as far as our purpose of the screencast, would be the other side of the bookend, perhaps. And that could be an opportunity to review content. I personally would probably connect more closely to the preview content and the flipped learning experience there, but there is no reason that you couldn't use Screencast for reviewing content at all there. That could simply be you demonstrating the practice of a skill and then looking for students to then demonstrate their ability to do that too, whether it's them creating something, a product, or engaged in some sort of activity to demonstrate their understanding of that. I have been reading a book recently by, oh gosh, I have it over here somewhere. It's the crew that's been doing the distance learning playbook and all those different books that have been selling very well in the last year here. And they were definitely very intentional in saying, if you're going to be doing some sort of review, like, make sure it's super intentional. Make sure that they are practicing a skill that is needed to be practiced. And that's just knowing where our students are, making sure that they are engaged in the activities they need to be engaged in, and avoid the mindless repetition. It's the skill and drill. That's going to turn our learners off quicker than anything else. So just being intentional with our practice of the skill. Next could be the connect the practice to the lesson success criteria, and that was really, you could do a bookend starting with some sort of a screencast, getting the information out, put in the learning target there, and you could possibly do a review video as well, but just making sure that we're connecting all of our actual lessons there, or our success criteria to that target as well. And then lastly, it's something that it's just good to think about as we're creating those screencasts is shorter is better. If we feel we need to be practice something over and over and over again, break it up. Break it up into different videos, break it up into different sessions, but just trying to avoid that cramming a bunch of either work or learning into one long session. As we'll see in just a minute, as we're thinking about planning our screencasts, we want to definitely go with less is more. So that does bring us to the things we should think about as we're building our screencast. Like what's in our plan there? Well, as we transition from the foundation of what our screencast should be about, what are some things we want to do? And that is definitely the keep it short. I love this graphic, and this is a graphic you can click on to actually visit the data itself, but it breaks down student engagement based off of the length of a video. And I know that I've made videos that go on. I mean, I used to do a online class for PSU, and the videos were so long. I feel so bad for those students that went through it. I owe them all an apology, because as soon as we get to the 12-minute mark of a video, we can start to see that engagement really drops down. But the sweet spot of a video is the 3 to 6 or 6 to 9 minutes, depending on what it is you're addressing. So when we say less is more, it truly is backed by the data to say we're losing our learners as the video goes on and on and on. So that kind of just helps us, build our screencast to be concise and to address that knowledge, knowing that if it's something a little bit longer, there's no reason we couldn't break these up. Making a couple of videos for a chapter, a unit, whatever it is that's being addressed, that's no problem. You break into three parts, that's okay. Excuse me. Building video-ready slides. And I think that this presentation here is sort of an example of having a slide deck put together that's kind of nice, something that you enjoy presenting, that's visually appealing, hopefully. I'm sure, like many of us, I get all of my slide decks from Slides Mania, or there's another one out there too. I can't remember the name of that slide deck place, but there's so many great slide decks out there, and I'm not that creative, so do a quick Google search for great pre-made slides, and you're going to find a bunch of them. Next, and this all depends on the purpose of the video. If you're creating screencasts for other teachers, you may consider making this a piece of advice for the teachers that are going to be using your videos, and that's to use visuals that personalize you and can catch your students' attention. Now, as a learning tech TOSA, I don't have any classes of my own, but I work with several teachers, so I'll share out slide decks on a particular activity or something that they might want to use. But I always say, hey, if you're using Bitmojis or if you're using something to personalize it to you, I mean, please do. Like, I don't want them to see Mr. Hoxie because they don't really know Mr. Hoxie. But gosh, those kids connect to even the little things. The Bitmoji is really quite a fascinating, just resource out there on how you can just make something so quick, looking like you a little bit, but it's really just that it's that personalization, it's that connection, it's that humanity that we're adding to this slide deck that wraps kids up into it. So just using a Bitmoji of yourself to capture attention, but also knowing that our learners are visual. If we can bring in graphs to demonstrate something, let's bring in a graph. Like my use of the fingers here, it's just a good way to say, hey, click on the finger because that's a resource. Like the little visual things we can do to help them with their learning. Be enthusiastic when you're putting your soundtrack in there. And luckily, with Screencastify or any of the other tools out there, we don't have to worry about like adding a soundtrack to a video track, to all these different tracks. They make it just super easy to record and go. Be enthusiastic as you're recording those screencasts. Like speak quickly with high energy and keeping your students engaged just with your voice, in addition to the visuals that you're building in there as well. And then lastly, which I think is super important, is to truly be yourself. When the pandemic first kicked in and I found myself doing many more screencasts than I had ever done before, I felt like I wanted to be super polished, and I was writing scripts, and I was doing all of these like professional things I thought were important. And then it didn't feel natural. I didn't feel like I was myself. And I was guessing that those screencasts that were being listened to, it probably sounded like the teacher in Charlie Brown, and just nobody was really getting me. So, take the scripts out. Your content, where you're going with your students. I found crumpling up the scripts and getting rid of that, but I would keep an outline. I would just have an outline on either a Google Doc or written out on a piece of paper. So I hit my targets that I really wanted to make sure I was addressing. But from there, I just want to be myself. And it was totally okay to make a mistake. In fact, as I was doing some professional developments last year, one piece of feedback that I received from many teachers was, I enjoyed hearing Ryan make a mistake because it showed me he was human, and they were just legit. I went down a wrong link, I opened up a wrong window, but just modeling that vulnerability, I think goes a long way with people that are feeling stressed or feeling like, oh wow, I don't want to be there. Like it's okay to mess up, and then just redirect yourself to show this is what we're all doing, and it's totally okay. After you've kind of got your foundation out there, you've thought about the foundation, what the content of your screencast is going to be. You've planned it out a little bit. You've got your visuals in your slide deck and some imagery to help personalize it. The next is really just the recording process. And recording, we have lots of different tools. And each one of these is a PPS specific tool that was put out there just so you know that you've got some options. Liliana, it sounds like you've been using Screencastify. And honestly, I love that. It's my favorite. It's easy to use. It's just that little extension on my browser. I don't feel like I'm opening up, professional software, and it gets the job done. There's a little bit of editing that you can do on the back end there. I find that I know pretty quickly if that screencast isn't going to go anywhere, and I'll just stop it and trash it and start again. But if you had to pause in the middle of something, you can go back and delete these sections. So I would definitely familiarize yourself with the Screencastify editing tools if you've not already, knowing that they're going to provide just enough to take care of it and make it a really great Screencastify, and nobody has to know. If you do feel like you're kind of ready for that next step, or if you're interested in like looking at just other resources, whether that's today or this summer or later on, Portland Public does have a subscription with WeVideo, and WeVideo is it's a legitimate video editing software tool. It reminds me a lot of iMovie from way back in the day, on the old green and blue and red iMacs that they used to have out there. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's overwhelming in terms of video production software, but there is a bit more of a learning curve. What is nice is they do have a screencast component. So you can definitely zero in a little bit more on the screencasting component. And I guess the advantage to that would be if you ever wanted to kind of move to that next step of either using picture in picture or split screen or some of those just fancy things, WeVideo has those options, whereas Screencastify does not. And every time, just being honest, every time I think I'm ready to like have a little picture in picture or a little more Hollywood, I kind of get into it. I'm like, I'm not. Screencastify is really all that I need there. The last one you might take a look at is Nearpod, and Nearpod is also another Portland Public resource that we've been using and that we'll be continuing to use next year. And that's a way for you to take you could take your slide decks and make them a little more interactive. There's actually another resource we're going to look at in just a minute to kind of move forward, but I wanted to definitely point out we do have Nearpod, and it's kind of the same thing. If you're feeling like your screencasts and Screencastify are you're rocking it and you're feeling really good about it, but you're kind of getting that like urge to maybe take a look and see what else is out there, these are the two places that I would go. But once again, rooted back in my honesty, I think I'll just kind of stick with Screencastify because it really does have everything that I need. There is another method to actually recording a screencast, and that would be a tablet method. And if you had an iPad or an Android tablet, there are lots of different screencast apps that are out there that allows for you to, you could use like a whiteboard and circle things and actually perform. And to be fairly, I think when I think of whiteboards, that's when I think of more of like a Khan Academy experience or like maybe something rooted in a math problem. Doesn't have to be, but that's just where my mind goes. And it kind of reminds me of the last fourth grade class I had worked with. We used a very similar tool, a very similar app called, I'm totally blanking on the name of it now. Oh, Show Me. It was called Show Me. And every day before we went home, we would have a free homework math problem of the day. And I'd have my students take a picture on their iPad of the math problem and within this app, and they would just actually perform the problem. And what was great for me was I would have a student explaining their mathematical thinking, working through the strategy, and then coming up with a correct answer. So essentially everyone in my class got that first math problem for homework taken care of, but they could also come back to it later. And it was really important because this was really, as we're shifting over to Common Core math, that my parents understood what was happening as well. So we can think about screencasts in terms of how we can educate our communities on things we're moving forward with as well. I would often have parents emailing me, hey, I don't understand this problem. And I would just email them back the video of the student explaining it. And honestly, that was more times than not was enough for them to move forward, or at the very least to say, hey, Maddie got it done like this. It took that pressure, hopefully, off of my parent community. In thinking of next steps, there are definitely ways to take our screencasts and then enhance them a little bit. And we talked a bit about Nearpod, and I think Nearpod is a good tool, but there's also this other one called Edpuzzle. Now, Edpuzzle is not a PPS resource, but it is a free resource for individual teachers to use. And that's just where you can start to add parts, or I guess like maybe check-ins on a video you've created there. In this example, and I'll fire it up for just a little bit. In this example, this takes a video of, let's see, is it this one? This one? Yes, it's this one. I'll go ahead and fire this one up. You might recognize this slam poet and his particular content. as long as it opens up. But really what I wanted to show is how we can add different components of like check-ins into a video we've already created. So here is Taylor Maley, and it's the What Teachers Make. Have you seen this one before? Oh, it's good. But what I'd like to point out is at the bottom down here, you can see all of these different little check-ins. And these are just different examples of how we can add either an open-ended question, a selected response question, a poll question, or just force a stop for students to think about what they're doing or what they're seeing or what they're learning. It's just a good way to kind of build in some instruction without actually being there. All right, so I'll go ahead and push play and watch a little bit of it to take a look and see what kind of questions we can add. Okay, and I always get confused when I watch this, but as I notice, the video starts doing that little buffering and you feel like, oh, my Wi-Fi's out. Well, no, take a look at the right. And we've got a note over here. And this is just a note that a teacher can add to their video to just kind of either set the scene or ask for students to reflect or whatever it is that they'd like to add. Now, what's nice is at the bottom, you can rewatch, skip it, or continue. And you can turn skip off if you definitely want to make sure your students stop and check things out. Okay, and just a really quick example of an open-ended question. I can stop a video and ask a question like, what is the settings for this video? And I don't really know, but I'll have to take a look at that. I don't know. So just a kind of a easy way to think about how we can take our screencasts and even add another layer of interactivity with it. And definitely I'll throw the link in there if you want to check the rest of this video out. It's pretty entertaining. It's something that it's been around for a while, but always a good one to reflect on. It's definitely something that you can use for formative assessments. It's something that you can kind of figure out where kids are. It's just a nice little tool to enhance the screencasts that you are providing. It can also be something that doesn't have to be super personalized if you're pushing your content out to other teachers, but it's a great way to have those check places already there, ready to go. All right. And kind of wrapping it up there, it's really sharing. And it sounds like that Liliana, that you've been doing a lot of the sharing already, but obviously with our digital hubs, we've kind of navigated towards Canvas and Seesaw for our K-5 and our 6-12 learners. But that's always not, that's not always the only place you can put them. You can definitely build these screencast libraries inside of Google Drive to share these folders out there with either particular teachers or teams. A little less public, but it's a great way to deliver these videos. You can also consider creating YouTube playlists based off of unit content. Really any way that you want to categorize it, YouTube will allow you to create that playlist. And they have a great way of making your videos public to the world, unlisted, which means nobody can find it unless you direct them to it. And then, of course, private, which truly means nobody else can access that video. So if you're creating content that even for your own, for your own self to have like a backup or just like a cloud version, so you know that it's safe in case that Chromebook gets dropped, or gosh, I spilled some LaCroix on my laptop the other day, and I thought, well, that's not good because we definitely know that those things can happen. Now, of course, this is the last slide, the honesty slide, and that is a lot of these lessons I certainly did not come up with on my own, but I've been doing a lot of reading and listening to podcasts, and each one of these text areas is a link to excuse me excuse me again, is a link to a resource and has helped me better understand how to build a better screencast and what are the things that I want to take a look in. The very first one, it's actually a guy who he visited Jennifer Gonzalez on the Cult of Pedagogy, one of my absolute favorite podcasts to listen to. And that's really all he's been doing for the last several years now, not in anticipation of a pandemic, but he found that that screencasts were a really great way to provide that instruction. And he's took it to the point where he's building his own school based around the flipped learning environment, screencasts providing content, and it's just a great read to look over. So please definitely feel free to take a look at any of these resources just to keep going on building that great screencast. And then, of course, lastly, we do have the PD survey. So if you do have a moment towards the end here, if you wouldn't mind taking the survey just to let us know how we did or what you'd like to see next, we would sure appreciate that. But with that, Liliana, let me go ahead and, I'm sorry, Lilia.
Lilia, yep.
Lilia, thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting. And if there's anything that you'd like to talk about, I'd love to chat with you.
I have a couple of questions. So question number one is Edpuzzle. Is there a time limit on Edpuzzle?
Oh, that's a really good question. I believe on the free version, in fact, I'll just go ahead and we'll take a look at it. I believe there is a time limit, but I don't know what it is. Let me jump over.
I'll find out. I thought maybe you know on top of your head, but that's fine. And then I also have a question about the YouTube playlist. Not a question, but I would appreciate if you could maybe show me how to create the YouTube playlist.
Sure. All right, so let's do this.
And what is the benefit of having all the videos on YouTube list or playlist versus Google Drive?
Well, I'll go ahead and stop recording.
Thank you.